Hi, I'm Kylie Roberts.
And I'm Mel Wombwell, and we are Shift Unlimited.
We are both qualified executive coaches, coach supervisors, and trainers of NLP and coaching. The world is a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous place. Every day we wake up to a new surprise. Uncertainty is chronic, instability is permanent, and disruption is common. This is the new normal. The game has changed. It's time to rip up the old rulebook. It's time to define success differently. A shift is happening. The shift is unlimited. We need leaders to live more purposeful lives and to lead more impactful businesses. In this podcast series, we will be doing a deeper dive into many facets of living and leading in this modern world, from founder to scale up, right through to leaders of global established organizations.
We will explore how we can be more holistic and authentic as we connect more deeply with ourselves, our relationships with others, and the wider world. In this podcast series, we'll engage in conversation together on topics that support the modern leader.
We have one wild, precious life to make change for good. And whilst change is daunting, so is staying the same. Let's begin. In this episode, we will be exploring listening. It's easy to talk about. It's much more nuanced to do it well in practice. When Richard Branson from Virgin was asked what the greatest leadership skill is, he replied with one word: listening. Listening is often underrated and very underused in leadership. In this episode, we'll look at the many ways in which we listen, most of which can be traps to us listening well. We'll explore a model for listening that Mel and I really love. So we're really glad that you're here with us on this episode. Welcome and enjoy this episode with us today. So let's start with the question why. Why is it so critical for leadership? Why is listening the thing that Richard Branson said is the number one thing? Would you like to talk about that, Mel?
We talked about the shift in leadership style from traditional leadership to this more modern, progressive leadership style, one that's based on inquiry and feedback. And listening underpins all of these particular leadership qualities. In order to ask, would we need to listen to the answer? Relationships are critical for business success as well in business today. We can't rely solely on just having a good product or service. So people want to feel connected. They want to feel connected to you, to your purpose as a business. It's a really transparent world. So good relationships, and particularly with Google reviews these days, are at the heart of us being successful in business. And to have good relationships, they're two-way and they need to feel strong and connected. And to have a good relationship, we need to really listen to the other person and hear what they're saying to us. We're also inundated with information in this day and age. We've got so much data coming at us, and our attention spans are getting shorter, so the quality of listening is going down. And shadowing and observing business meetings of leaders, we notice there's a lot of talking, not a lot of listening.
Yeah, we do definitely notice that. Most people, most adults would say that they're actually good at listening, but there are quite a few pitfalls that we easily slip into. So sometimes we think we're listening, but we're not really listening. We're just waiting for the gap so that we can say the things we want to say. We might also be listening for the opportunities for us to then say something that allow us to sound more intelligent. There are ways in which we can listen so that we get a chance to be seen as funny or crack a joke or bring humor into a situation. And we can also listen for how we can sound more important. We can listen so we can just be hearing the information that we want to receive. That's one of the unconscious biases that we can have, which is the confirmation bias. So we are confirming what we already know. So we're listening for evidence of what we already know. Or we could also be listening for how we personally can benefit from what's being said. Those are some of the traps that we can fall into when we're listening. What else, Mel?
We can be listening in a distracted way, by which we mean we're listening to overhear a conversation next to us rather than paying attention to the person in front of us, or distracted by music or noise or something that's going on in the environment around us, which indicates to the other person we're not really present for them. We can also get lost in our own thoughts. We can go inside our own heads. You can kind of tell when people's eyes get a bit glazed that you've lost them and they're now thinking about something that's going on in their head. We can be listening for what's going on with the other person. So that's a different kind of listening, one that is more present, more connected. So listening and trying to sense and intuit what might be going on for the other person. If we're concerned, we can be listening for how we can help the other person. So listening and thinking to ourselves, how can I help or support or solve or fix the other person? We can listen to really understand the problem. So that's again a deeper quality of listening to really get good understanding. And then the final one is a really deep listening, or where we're listening not just for what's being said, we're listening to the potential, what isn't being said, what else might be there, listening beyond.
When we share this with leadership teams that we work with, they are often quite surprised at how easily they do fall into some of these traps here. And we're often asked the question, well, how do we stop ourselves from falling into these traps? So listening isn't as easy as we think it is. How do I stop myself from falling into these traps? There are two practices that Mel and I advocate when we coach leaders, and they are the rapid repeat and the Hendricks Listening Model. Mel, would you like to talk about the rapid repeat?
So the rapid repeat method is where we use the inner voice that's in our head, the one that's just going and can be very distracting, and we bring it into the conversation. So as the person is speaking, we are repeating in our head what they're saying. That means we pay full attention to what they're saying. The other benefit is we can remember names more easily, we can remember details and information more easily when we use the rapid repeat. So in our head, we're repeating, so we hear something twice. And again, the more we hear things, the more we're likely to remember it. So that's a really powerful technique to get your inner narrative or your inner dialogue involved in the conversation so it doesn't become a distraction. Did you want to talk about the next one, the Hendricks Listening Model, Kylie?
Yeah, and the other model that we follow is the one that Mel's just mentioned, the Hendricks Listening Model. It comes from Harville Hendricks, and Harville Hendricks studied hundreds of relationships and found that mishearing was one of the most common areas where relationships fall down. So the Hendricks Listening Model came out of that study, and the Hendricks Listening Model is three simple, easy to remember steps. The first is to say, what I heard you say is. And what you say after you say that is exactly what you heard the other person say, rather than falling into any of the traps of whether or not you agreed with what they said or what you wanted them to say, what they didn't say. Just purely and cleanly, what I heard you say is. The second step is, have I got you? And this is just to check a simple yes or no of, did I listen cleanly or have I brought my own stuff in? And then the third step is there more? And that gives the other person an opportunity to build on what they've said. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've forgotten to repeat something back to them. It just might mean that whilst they've heard you play it back to them, they've got more to say. So it is actually an avenue to open the door up for the other person to share even more. So the Hendricks listening model is three simple steps. What I heard you say is, have I got you? And is there more? And in coaching and leadership, listening well is just as important as it is in any other relationship we have in life. Both the rapid repeat and the Hendricks listening model are really easy to adapt. And just like we mentioned in a previous episode, habits come from practice. They're really easy to adapt. And if you practice, 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 it will just become an unconscious process and supernatural for you to practice and deliver and create healthy relationships. But it does sound easier than it is. How difficult has it been in your experience, Mel, to change some of the patterns of listening to be practicing Hendricks and rapid repeat?
Well, I think I read somewhere, Kylie, that we are on autopilot something like 80% of the time. And when we're on autopilot, we've switched off all our active senses, which means by its very nature, we won't be listening very well. It's a bit scary to think we're not listening properly 80% of the time. So when we start to adopt these new habits, and you and I, Kylie, have used Hendricks, particularly when we're getting complex briefs from clients, and we'll play back everything that we've heard them say that we've written down. And invariably there's more, or there's a nuance or something like that. So powerful. The more we've found, the more we practice it, the more we use it with each other, with our clients, when we're getting briefs, the more it becomes a habit, the more easily it becomes second nature to us. Relationships have definitely, for me, thrived because people really feel listened to. My children, my husband, most of the time, and the key relationships around me. I think it's just has to be a conscious choice, almost like going into a meeting and saying, I'm really going to be listening. I'm really going to pay attention and be fully there. Even then, it's almost impossible to be doing it 100% of the time. As a coach, our coachees can sense when we're there, fully present, really listening to what they're saying. And then they're so much more likely to tell us the real things that are going on rather than maybe some of the more superficial things. So it's a really, really powerful thing, particularly in coaching and leadership. And it keeps us focused on what the person's saying, it keeps us really connected to them. It's incredible. And as Richard Branson says, probably one of the most important skills. So today we have talked about, in this short podcast, something that sounds so easy when we talk about it, and in practice is so much more difficult. We would encourage you to pay attention to yourself today as you go through your meetings and your conversations and start to get a feel for what might be your listening traps and how might you use rapid repeat and Hendricks listening in your work and your life to really connect more deeply with the people around you. Thank you very much for your time today.